Hello everyone and welcome to what I find to be, honestly, a very interesting idea for a video. Because today, they did a lot of changes to seaweed spores. Along with all the other changes like Arty Nights and stuff. Like, seaweed spores had a small section in the update page, but overall the update was incredibly massive. Basically, they changed a lot of the numbers for mobs that drop seaweed spores. And overall, they drop significantly more than what they used to, along with adding a passive seaweed drop that would spawn on the ground for you to add even more to the seaweed spores. Now, why this is so significant is, well, basically, I just proceeded to use a full trident at the lobstrosities in the underwater section. And it works because they are in the shallow section in the far southeast of the underwater fossil island area. And so therefore, on top of the incredibly buff drop rate of seaweed spores, where they changed it from 1 to a what they claim is a variation from 1 to 5 seaweed spores, but realistically, I just constantly get 5 seaweed spore drops, so I think they locked it at a hard 5 for every time you get a seaweed spore drop from lobstrosities. Basically, you get an incredible amount, and honestly, it may just work to replace charters. Most important thing to look at probably when you're trying to do lobstrosities, first of all, is the setup. So, I used a Void Mage setup because it is lighter than Arms and I don't have access to Ancestral, which is far lighter and much better to use here if you have access to it. And basically, there's a couple things to note here. Herb Sack, they drop noted and unnoted herbs for some reason. I'm not entirely sure why, but they do, so make sure to bring your herb sack with you if you have it. Rune pouch for the random runes that they drop. They drop chaos runes, death runes, water runes. Yeah, they drop a couple of things. Oh yeah, and nature runes. People are probably going to question the graceful cape. And basically, that's because if you get too heavy while underwater, you stop being able to run. And basically, if you stop running, then obviously you're going to move a lot slower if you're trying to get the random seaweed spore spawns that will appear throughout your trip. And you notice I have no on-hand or off-hand. Basically, you can't have those equipped when you go underwater, so just have a trident in your inventory, and you can't have an offhand. It just won't let you. It'll say you can't swim. I tried it. It's right there. Now also, there are a lot of upgrades that I can do to this setup. I can switch out the Amulet of Glory for an Occult Necklace. I can get a Seer's Ring. And I can get a Trident of the Squeeze, all of which will give you much higher results than I got when I was doing my testing with a full Trident. So yeah. Oh yeah, don't forget a teleport. I personally prefer the Dig Site Pendant. It allows you to get back here and go straight into another seaweed run if you have a full inventory, and then just go straight back. It's completely your call on that though, just some sort of teleport out because it's a bit frustrating to get out. Alright, so now we should get into the actual killing of the lobstrosities, I suppose. On the right you see what I used to use for my inventory. I brought a full graceful switch in the thoughts that it would help me. And I also brought wizard boots, but I really prefer the flippers for their movement. And basically, yeah, you're kind of just tridenting them. I like using this specific tile on the far southeastern corner of this bubble for killing these because they seem to just not be able to hit you back, and they get stuck on everything. And yeah, basically all you need to do is just click on the lobstrosities and stay within the bubble as much as possible. Make sure, of course, to pick up any loot that appears on the ground from the lobstrosities that you may want to take, and to immediately go back to your bubble afterwards. Now, seaweed spores also will spawn on the ground fairly frequently. I'd say on average when I was doing this, they spawned every 2 to 3 minutes, and they spawned in quantities of 1 to 3, but you have to be really careful because the seaweed spores will only stay on the ground for what seems like 15 to 30 seconds before they despawn. So it's kind of like bird nests in that sense, if you remember those. And also, just make sure to really watch your inventory because honestly, these things drop so much. You can look on the right of my screen and see that my inventory is almost full. Of course, I was bringing full graceful because I thought it would help for some reason, and I don't recommend that you do that, but yeah. And also, just like seaweed spores as well, they spawn only to you, so you don't have to worry about other people getting them. Other people will get their own spawns, and the seaweed spores will just be there for you. I believe there's a very minimal animation for when they spawn that you can try to notice, like a little bubble appearing on the ground. But honestly, I'd just make sure that you have item overlays on for the seaweed spores and that you are picking them up very quickly before they despawn. Another important thing about the random seaweed spore spawns is that they seem to have set locations. So initially I was using that bubble in the southeastern corner, but the number of locations that the seaweed spores could spawn were very limited, so I feel like I was actually getting less seaweed spores over time there than I was in this area over here. So definitely take note of that. It may just be like RNG and everything, but at the same time it could actually be significant, and you could have a chance based on the location rather than just a chance of one appearing near you. You never know. Here you are actually going to see some seaweed spores spawning near me. Right there is a 3 spawn, and that was a random RNG spawn. It wasn't one that came from the lobstrosities. And like I said, you typically only have about 15 or so seconds to pick those up. So always just make sure to be watching those areas. Typically, if you're using this spot that I was in, there will be none that spawn to the south of you. So you typically just have to watch to the west and north of you. That's my best advice there. Now, I did this full trident at the lobstrosities, and I came across quite a decent amount of loot, I'd say. Especially, obviously, the seaweed spores. Basically, if you look at my invent right here, I got a lot of stuff. All of this came directly from the lobstrosities, not from anywhere else, including this giant seaweed right here, and the regular seaweed, along with 243 seaweed spores. Going more in depth, we have a couple of seeds. We have, in the herb sec actually, if we check this, a lot of rainars actually. And then there were also noted herbs on top of all of this. I find it kind of weird that they drop noted and unnoted herbs, actually. But I guess that's what happens. And apparently you need to take a herb sack there anyway, even though that's incredibly weird. And also, they dropped a decent number of nature runes, chaos runes, and a small number of death runes. Taking note here that I picked up almost everything that I could from the lobstrosities. A lot of this, honestly, it is not worth it to. But, I mean, you can if you want to, because it doesn't require much inventory to have everything. You just slowly build up fossils over time, and fossils is a big part of this too, actually, because fossils will eventually build up to passive XP, which for Ironmen, I know typically like to put it into herblore or rune crafting, and that is honestly something that I'm probably going to do when I have enough fossils built up. So yeah. Alright, so let's get into the numbers now. How much crafting XP can you bank an hour doing giant seaweed and seaweed spores from lobstrosities? Now, on average, you are getting approximately 110 seaweed spores an hour if you are doing this with very efficient gear. I was getting approximately 80 to 90, but with Shrine of the Swamp, Occult Necklace, even Ancestral, you're probably going to get more than me. And on top of that, you have to account for the giant seaweed and the regular seaweed that you get from the lobstrosities. So, overall, as you can see on your screen now, all the numbers for the calculations of banked crafting XP are up, and the numbers are truly mind-boggling. I was surprised when I did all these calculations out for these seaweed spores. When you fully plant and grow all the seaweed spores, which of course will take time, you will get approximately 1.8 million XP out of the seaweed spores that you get in 1 hour. Assuming that you make light orbs out of them, of course. And realistically, that's all super AFK. Using banked molten glass is one of the easiest things to do, and it gives you so much AFK time. All you really need to do is get the buckets of sand to make it, and you're good to go, really. You can just sit at the bank, relax, watch a show or something, just chill. It's very, very good. And really, you should all be doing this if you're Ironmen, because charters are incredibly packed. And honestly, I understand most Ironmen are frustrated with charters. So this is your best alternative, and it's incredibly good. I also want to thank you all for watching this video. I know, like, it's a lot of hype for the seaweed spores and the crafting methods to be coming out, and honestly, you should take advantage of this. You really should. The numbers, as I just said, are massive. And if you don't take this now, honestly, they might even nerf it. It's that strong. So get out there and kill those lobstrosities. Have a good day, everyone.